My mother-in-law called me cheap and threw the ring I bought for her daughter at my face, so I ended the engagement, and what happened next left them speechless. I, a 27-year-old male, grew up in a middle-class household where financial stability wasn't just a goal, it was a necessity. My parents taught me the value of saving, and I carried that lesson into adulthood. I met Grace, a 25-year-old female, 2 years ago at a barbecue hosted by a mutual friend. I was there because my buddy Ethan wouldn't stop nagging me to get out of the house more. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a burger, a couple of awkward conversations and heading home early. But then I saw Grace. She wasn't the loud center of attention type. She was sitting at the edge of the yard, sketching something in a notebook. I walked over, asked what she was drawing, and we started talking. She had this calm energy that was so different from the usual look-at-me type of people I'd met before. One thing led to another, and by the end of the night we'd exchanged numbers. We clicked almost immediately. Grace was sweet, creative, and had this way of making the smallest things feel meaningful. She'd tell me about her favorite art projects, the way she wanted to open her own studio someday, and all these little dreams that made her eyes light up. I loved listening to her talk about it all. But early on, she brought up her mom. "She's kind of intense," Grace said one night when we were grabbing dinner. "How intense?" I asked, kind of joking but not really. Grace sighed. "She just has really strong opinions about everything. My job, my friends, my clothes. She means well, though. She just wants me to do well. My friends, my clothes. She means well, though. She just wants me to do well." I didn't think much of it at the time. Everyone has family quirks, right? But when I met Linda, her mom, I realized this wasn't just some quirky mom who got a little too involved. This was a full-blown control freak. Linda was polite the first time we met, but it felt fake, like she was sizing me up. She asked about my job. I work in tech, where I went to school, and then immediately asked, "What's your long-term plan?" I'm planning to grow in my role and maybe start my own company one day," I said, trying to sound confident. She raised an eyebrow, gave Grace this look, and said, "Well, stability is important. Grace deserves someone who can provide." That rubbed me the wrong way, but I let it go. Grace seemed nervous, and I didn't want to make things awkward. As time went on, though, I started noticing how much control Linda had over Grace's life. Grace had always wanted to be an artist, but Linda had pushed her into accounting because art doesn't pay the bills. Grace hated her job, but anytime she talked about quitting or pursuing art, Linda would guilt her with, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you thank me?" It wasn't just her career either. Linda had opinions about everything. Grace's clothes, the food she ate, even how she wore her hair. If Grace bought a dress Linda didn't approve of, she'd make comments like, "You really think that flatters you?" What bothered me the most was how Grace would just take it. She never stood up to her mom, always brushing it off like, "She's just old-fashioned," or "She doesn't mean it like that." At first, I tried to be supportive. I'd tell Grace she didn't need to let her mom control her, that she was smart and capable enough to make her own choices. Grace would nod and thank me, but nothing ever changed. The longer we dated, the more I started feeling like Linda wasn't just controlling Grace's life. She was starting to influence our relationship too. Linda had this way of making me feel like I wasn't good enough, even when she wasn't directly saying it. She'd make comments like, "It's nice that you're doing okay for yourself," or, "Tech is so unpredictable, isn't it?" Grace never said anything when her mom made these comments. She'd just give me this apologetic look like, "I know she's being a pain, but what can I do?" One time, we were at dinner with her parents, and Linda started talking about how men should always provide, and how she was lucky Grace's dad had real ambition. I could feel my face heating up, but Grace just sat there quietly, not saying a word. Later, I brought it up. "Why don't you ever say anything when your mom talks like that?" "She's just like that," Grace said. "It's not worth the argument." It frustrated me, but I didn't push too hard. I loved Grace, and I figured maybe this was just something we'd deal with over time. But looking back, I think that was the first crack in the foundation. The truth is, Linda's control over Grace wasn't just a problem for her, it was starting to become a problem for us. The more I tried to ignore it, the harder it became to see a future where Linda wasn't pulling the strings. Still, I held on to the hope that things could get better. I thought maybe if I showed Linda how serious I was about Grace, she'd ease up. That hope is what led to the proposal and, ultimately, everything that came after. After 2 years of dating, I knew I wanted to marry Grace, despite her mom's constant interference. I loved Grace for who she was, kind, patient, and creative. I'd spent months saving up for a ring. It wasn't some massive rock you'd see in a movie, but it was perfect in my eyes. A platinum band with a beautiful diamond solitaire. It was elegant and timeless, something I knew Grace would appreciate. I planned to keep the proposal intimate. Grace had never been one for grand gestures, and I wanted the moment to feel personal and special. One Saturday afternoon, I took her to our favorite park by the river. It was a place we often went to just relax, and it had this spot with a bench overlooking the water. We were sitting there talking about our plans for the weekend when I decided to go for it. I pulled out the ring box and got down on one knee. "Grace," I said, feeling my heart race a little, "I love you, and I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Her face lit up. "Yes," she said, tears in her eyes. She hugged me so tightly I almost forgot to actually put the ring on her finger. For a few days, everything felt perfect. Grace kept looking at the ring and smiling, and I thought I'd nailed it. We talked about wedding plans, something simple, maybe outdoors, and I started to feel like we were on the same page. Then, Grace suggested we visit her parents to share the news and get their blessing. I won't lie, I wasn't thrilled about the idea. Linda wasn't exactly my biggest fan, and I knew she'd have something to say about the ring, the wedding, or both. But Grace seemed so excited about the idea that I didn't want to ruin it for her. "We'll just tell them together," Grace said, squeezing my hand. "Mom will come around. She just needs to see how happy we are." I nodded, even though I wasn't convinced. When we arrived at her parents' house, Linda was sitting in the living room with her husband, Mike. Now, Mike's a quiet guy. He mostly stays out of Linda's way, which I can't really blame him for. He gave us a polite nod when we walked in, while Linda's eyes immediately darted to Grace's hand. "What's this?" Linda asked, her tone sharp. Grace smiled, holding up her hand. "We're engaged." For a moment, Linda didn't say anything. She just stared at the ring like she was trying to figure out if it was a joke. Then she let out this small laugh. Not the happy kind, but the kind that makes you feel like you've done something wrong. "That's the ring?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, isn't it beautiful?" Grace said, still smiling. Linda didn't answer. Instead, she walked over, grabbed Grace's hand, and examined the ring like it was a piece of costume jewelry. "It's so small." She walked over, grabbed Grace's hand, and examined the ring like it was a piece of costume jewelry. "It's so small," she finally said. "Are you sure this is an engagement ring?" "Mom," Grace said, her smile fading. "Don't start." "Don't start?" Linda repeated, looking at me now. "Adam, you're telling me you couldn't get her something a little more substantial?" I felt my jaw clench. I'd expected some comments, but this felt like a straight-up attack. "I picked this ring because it's meaningful," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's elegant and within our budget." I didn't think the size of the diamond was what mattered. Linda let go of Grace's hand and crossed her arms. "An engagement ring is supposed to show how serious you are. This looks like you're cutting corners." "Mom," Grace said, her voice sharper this time, but Linda wasn't done. "I'm just saying, Grace deserves better. If you can't afford a proper ring, how are you going to afford a wedding, or a house, or kids?" Mike, who'd been sitting quietly the whole time, finally spoke up. "Linda, maybe we should just congratulate them." Linda shot him a look that could freeze water. "Mike, I'm just being honest. This is our daughter's future we're talking about." I took a deep breath. I love Grace, and I want to build a life with her. I'm not going to blow all my savings on a ring when we have a future to plan for. Linda laughed again, that same condescending laugh. "That's a nice speech, Adam, but it sounds like an excuse." Before I could say anything else, she grabbed the ring off the coffee table where Grace had set it down. "If this is the best you can do," she said, tossing it back onto the table, "then maybe you're not ready for marriage." Grace's face went pale. "Mom, stop, stop," she said, her voice breaking. But Linda ignored her. Grace, you need to think about this. Marriage is a serious commitment. You can't just say yes to the first guy who comes along with a cheap ring. That was it for me. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I'm not going to sit here and be insulted. I love Grace, but I won't let you disrespect me like this. Linda didn't even flinch. If you're serious about marrying my daughter, you'll prove it. Get her a real ring. Until then, don't waste our time. I turned to Grace, hoping she'd say something, anything to back me up, but she just stood there, looking torn. Adam, let's just go, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. We left. The car ride back to my apartment was completely silent. I wanted to talk about what had just happened, but I also didn't trust myself to say something I'd regret. When we got to my place, Grace finally spoke up. I'm sorry about my mom. She's just protective. Protective? I repeated, my voice rising. Grace! She called the ring cheap and threw it at me. That's not protective. That's cruel. She doesn't mean it like that, Grace said, avoiding my eyes. She just has high standards. High standards? I said, shaking my head. Grace, she disrespected me in front of you, and you didn't say a word. How am I supposed to deal with that for the rest of my life? Grace didn't have an answer. She just sat there looking like she wanted to cry, and for the first time I started wondering if love was enough to make this work. After the nightmare at Linda's house, Grace and I were in an awkward limbo. We didn't talk much about what had happened, and whenever I brought it up, she'd change the subject or say, I'll talk to her soon. Days turned into a week, and nothing had changed. Then, one evening, Grace dropped a bomb on me. My mom thinks I should go stay with her for a while, she said hesitantly as we sat on the couch. I almost choked on my drink. What? Why? She just wants to talk things over, Grace said, not meeting my eyes. Talk things over? Grace, she doesn't want to talk. She wants to control you. Grace sighed, fidgeting with her hands. I know she was out of line, but she's still my mom. She says she wants to help us figure things out. Help? I said, incredulous. Grace, she thinks I'm not good enough for you. How is that helping? She's just worried about me, Grace said quietly. She doesn't want me to make a mistake. I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around it. You don't actually think this is a good idea, do you? Grace hesitated. I don't know. Maybe it'll calm her down. Maybe if I spend some time with her, she'll see how much you mean to me. Or she'll use that time to convince you to leave me, I said, my frustration building. Grace didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the floor, and I could tell her mind was already made up. The next day, she packed a small bag and left for her parents' house. She said it was just for a few days, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had gotten exactly what she wanted. At first, Grace texted me like everything was fine. Mom's being nice, she wrote one evening. She's not bringing up the ring or the fight. I didn't believe that for a second. Linda was many things, but letting things go wasn't one of them. Sure enough, a couple of days later, Grace's messages started to change. She was still polite, but she sounded distant. When I asked how things were going, she'd say things like, Mom's just worried about us, or she thinks we need more time to figure things out. What bothered me most wasn't just Linda's interference. It was Grace's willingness to go along with it. I knew she didn't agree with her mom deep down, but she never pushed back. It was like Linda had this invisible leash on her, and no matter how much Grace wanted to break free, she couldn't. One night, Grace called me from her parents' house. She sounded nervous, almost like she didn't want to be having the conversation. Adam, she began, Mom thinks we should slow things down. Of course she does, I said bitterly. What exactly does slow things down mean? She just thinks we rushed into the engagement, Grace said. She thinks maybe we should take some time apart and figure out if we're really ready for marriage. I felt my stomach drop. Grace, is this what you want, or is this just your mom talking? She hesitated. I don't know. I think maybe we do need some time. Things have been so stressful lately, and I don't know. Of course things are stressful, I said, trying to stay calm. Your mom's been stirring the pot since the day I proposed, and instead of shutting her down, you're doing everything she says. That's not fair, Grace said, her voice trembling. She's just trying to protect me. Protect you from what? I snapped. From being happy? From having a life outside of her control? Grace didn't respond. After a long pause, she said, I just need a little more time to think. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Fine, I said finally. The next few days were quiet. Grace barely texted, and when she did, it was short and vague. I could feel the distance growing between us, and I knew Linda was behind it. One night, I got a call from Ethan, the same friend who'd introduced me to Grace. He'd heard about the fight from one of Grace's friends. "Man, I hate to say it," Ethan said, "but it sounds like her mom's trying to sabotage this whole thing." "Yeah, no kidding. I hate to say it," Ethan said, "but it sounds like her mom's trying to sabotage this whole thing." "Yeah, no kidding," I said. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I love Grace, but I can't keep fighting her mom for control of our relationship, and it's not like Grace is standing up for me." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "You gotta figure out if Grace is really on your side, man. If she's not, then what's the point?" He was right, but it wasn't that simple. I wanted to believe Grace would come around, that she'd see what her mom was doing and finally stand up to her. But the longer she stayed at her parents' house, the less I believed that would happen. A few days later, Grace called me again. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "I don't know if I did the right thing by taking a break. I don't know what else to do." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Grace didn't know what to do because she'd spent her whole life being told what to do. Linda had made every major decision for her. And now, when it really mattered, Grace couldn't break free. "Grace," I said, my voice softer now, "I love you, but I can't marry someone who lets their mom control their life. I need you to choose, me or her." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "I need time," she finally said. "Take all the time you need, but don't expect me to wait around while your mom decides how our relationship should go." We hung up and I sat there staring at my phone, wondering if I'd just ended things for good. Deep down, though, I knew the truth. Linda had already done that. A week after Grace told me she needed time, I hit my limit. The silence between us had stretched so long it felt like we weren't even a couple anymore. Every day that passed, I couldn't stop thinking about how Linda had completely taken over. Grace wasn't acting like the woman I fell in love with. She was acting like a puppet, and Linda was pulling the strings. Then Grace texted me, "Can we talk tonight? Mom says we should all sit down and figure this out." I stared at my phone, dumbfounded. The nerve of Linda to insert herself into a conversation that should have been between Grace and me. I fired back, "This isn't about your mom, it's about us. I'll come by, but only because I need to say my piece." That evening, I drove to her parents' house, feeling equal parts angry and defeated. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let Linda talk to me like she had before. When I arrived, Grace was waiting by the door. She looked nervous, wringing her hands like she was trying to hold herself together. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. "Let's just get this over with," I replied. Walking past her into the living room, Linda was sitting on the couch like she owned the world, with Mike beside her, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Grace sat down next to her mom, leaving me to take the chair across from them. The setup felt like a bad job interview, and I already knew who wasn't getting hired. Linda spoke first. "Adam, we're glad you're here. This has been a stressful time for Grace, and we want to make sure she's making the right decisions for her future." I clenched my jaw. "This has been a stressful time for Grace, and we want to make sure she's making the right decisions for her future." I clenched my jaw. "This isn't about Grace's future. This is about you controlling her life." Linda's smile didn't falter, but her tone turned sharper. "I'm her mother. It's my job to make sure she's taken care of. And what about my job as her fiancé?" I shot back. "Or does that not count because I didn't buy a ring big enough for your standards?" Grace flinched but didn't say anything. Linda, however, leaned forward, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "It's not about the size of the ring, Adam. It's about what it represents. A man who can't invest in a proper engagement ring clearly doesn't take marriage seriously." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean a man who doesn't go into debt to impress you? Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You want me to prove myself to you, not Grace." Linda didn't deny it. "If you're going to marry my daughter, you have to show me that you're capable of giving her the life she deserves." "And what about what Grace wants?" I asked, turning to her. "Do you even care about that?" Grace opened her mouth to speak, but Linda cut her off. "Of course I care about what Grace wants. That's why I'm here to guide her." Guide her, I said, my voice rising. Linda, you don't guide her, you control her. And Grace, you let her. You let her dictate everything, even our relationship. Grace finally spoke, her voice shaky. I just don't want to upset her. And what about upsetting me? I asked. Do my feelings matter at all in this? Or is this just about keeping your mom happy? Adam, it's not that simple, Grace said, tears welling up in her eyes. It is that simple, I said. You either want to marry me or you don't. And if you do, then you need to stand up to her. Linda let out a short laugh. You're giving her an ultimatum? That's rich. You're acting like you're doing her a favor by marrying her. I'm not giving her an ultimatum, I said, glaring at Linda. I'm giving her a choice. Either she chooses me and our future together, or she chooses to stay under your thumb. But I won't be part of this toxic dynamic anymore. The room went silent. Mike looked like he wanted to crawl under the couch, and Grace looked like she was on the verge of breaking down. Linda, however, stayed calm. Grace, Linda said, turning to her daughter, you need to think about this carefully. Marriage is a big decision, and it's clear Adam isn't ready to make any concessions. Stop talking for her, I snapped. Grace, this is your decision. What do you want? Grace looked at me, then at her mom, then back at me. Her lips trembled as she said, I don't know. Those 3 words hit me harder than I expected. I realized then that Grace wasn't going to choose me, not because she didn't love me, but because she didn't know how to stand up to her mom. I think we're done here, I said, standing up. Grace, I love you, but I can't keep fighting this battle alone. You need to figure out what you really want without your mom telling you what to think. Adam, wait, Grace said, grabbing my arm. I just need more time. I shook my head. You've had time, Grace, and all it's done is push us further apart. Linda stood up, her expression smug. Well, if you're leaving, don't expect to come crawling back when you realize you've made a mistake. I turned to her, my voice steady. The only mistake I made was thinking I could win Grace's love without your interference. I'm done playing this game, Linda. I hope one day Grace realizes how much damage you've done. I walked out without looking back, my heart heavy, but my mind clear. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I'd taken back control of my life. The next morning, my phone started buzzing. Grace texted me a long message apologizing, but it wasn't the kind of apology I needed. It was full of excuses. I'm sorry you felt that way. And Mom didn't mean to come off so harsh. She even wrote, I just need time to get her to understand where we're coming from. Where we're coming from. There was no we in that room last night. It was me versus her mom, with Grace sitting on the sidelines. I didn't reply right away. Honestly, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her to stop trying to fix things if she wasn't willing to take a stand, but another part of me just didn't want to deal with it anymore. By the afternoon, Grace was calling. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, her voice shaky. Adam, please call me back. I want to talk about last night. I know things got heated, but we can work through this. I know it ring. She left a voicemail, her voice shaky. Adam, please call me back. I want to talk about last night. I know things got heated, but we can work through this. I know we can. Could we, though? Every time I replayed the night in my head, all I could see was her silence. I'd stood up for myself, for us, and she just sat there, letting her mom dictate the terms of our relationship. The days that followed felt like a blur. Grace kept trying to reach out, alternating between apologizing and justifying her mom's behavior. She'd text things like, Mom just wants the best for me, or, she's always been like this, but she'll come around. But I wasn't buying it. Linda wasn't going to come around. She'd spent Grace's entire life controlling her, and Grace let her because it was easier than standing up to her. One evening, Ethan came over to check on me. He'd heard bits and pieces of what had happened from our mutual friends, and he wanted to get the full story. So, you really called off the engagement? He asked as he plopped onto my couch. Yup, I said, handing him a beer. I couldn't do it anymore. Her mom was running the show and Grace wasn't even trying to stop her. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You sure Grace wasn't just caught off guard? Maybe she needed more time to figure things out. That's the thing, though, I said, sitting across from him. This isn't new. Her mom's been controlling her forever and Grace just lets it happen. She doesn't push back. She doesn't even try. How am I supposed to marry someone who can't stand up for me or herself? Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, that's rough, man. But you really think it's over? You guys were solid before all this. Were we, though? I asked. Or was I just ignoring the red flags because I loved her? He didn't have an answer for that, and honestly, neither did I. A few days later, the rumors started. I got a call from a friend of mine, Sarah, who's also friends with Grace. You know Linda's been talking about you, right? Sarah said, her voice low, like she was sharing a secret. Of course she is, I said, rolling my eyes. What's she saying now? She's telling people you're too cheap to provide for Grace, and that you embarrassed her family by walking out, Sarah said. She's making it sound like you're some broke loser who bailed on Grace because you couldn't handle the pressure. I laughed, but it wasn't because it was funny. Of course she is. Linda can't accept that someone would actually stand up to her. She has to make me the bad guy. Honestly, some people are seeing through it, Sarah said. Everyone knows how controlling Linda is, but I thought you should know what's going around. Thanks, Sarah, I said. I appreciate it. When I hung up, I felt a mix of anger and exhaustion. Linda wasn't just ruining Grace's life, she was trying to ruin mine too. But the more I thought about it, the less I cared. Let her talk. I wasn't going to waste my energy fighting a battle I'd already walked away from. A week later, Grace showed up at my apartment unannounced. When I opened the door, she looked like she'd been crying. Can we talk? She asked, her voice small. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the couch, clutching her hands in her lap like she was afraid they'd fly away. I'm sorry, she said after a long pause. I'm sorry for not standing up for you. I know I should have, but it's just so hard with my mom. I get that, I said, sitting across from her. But Grace, this isn't just about your mom. This is about us. I need a partner who has my back, and that night you didn't. I know, she said, her voice breaking. I know I let you down, but I love you, Adam. I don't want to lose you. I love you too, I said, my voice soft. But love isn't enough if you're not willing to fight for us. Your mom's always going to be in the picture, and if you can't stand up to her now, how will you stand up to her when we're married? When we have kids? Grace didn't have an answer. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face. Grace, I said gently, I need you to take a hard look at this situation. Not just for me, but for yourself. Do you really want to spend the rest of your life living in your mom's shadow? She nodded slowly. I know you're right, she said, but I don't know how to change. You have to figure that out, I said, but I can't be the one to do it for you. She left that night, and I knew it was the last time we'd talk as a couple. Linda tried to contact me once, sending a text that read, If you'd just apologize, we could all move past this. I deleted it without replying. After I walked away from Grace and Linda, I didn't expect to hear much about what happened to them. I thought I'd left that chapter behind for good, but life has a funny way of keeping you connected to things you're trying to let go of. A few weeks after I returned the engagement ring, Sarah, our mutual friend, reached out again. Hey, she said over the phone. You're not going to believe what Linda's up to now. I sighed, already tired of hearing Linda's name. What now? She's trying to set Grace up with this guy, Sarah said. Some rich guy she met through one of her charity events. He's older, like mid-40s and apparently loaded. That sounds about right, I said bitterly. Linda's dream. A guy with a fat wallet who doesn't care about anything else. Sarah lowered her voice, as if Grace might overhear her. Grace isn't into it, though. She's been telling Linda she doesn't want to meet him, but you know how Linda is. She won't take no for an answer. It didn't surprise me. Linda had always treated Grace's life like it was a chessboard, and Grace was just another piece she could move around to suit her own goals. A month later, I ran into Ethan at the gym. He mentioned that Grace had moved out of her parents' house. Wait, what? I asked, dropping the weights I'd been holding. Yeah, apparently Linda kicked her out, Ethan said. I couldn't believe it. She kicked her out? Why? From what I heard, Grace finally put her foot down about that rich guy Linda wanted her to date, Ethan said. She refused to even meet him, and Linda flipped out. Told her if she wasn't going to listen, she wasn't welcome in the house anymore. Wow, I said, shaking my head. I mean, I knew Linda was controlling, but that's next level. Ethan shrugged. Honestly, it might be the best thing that's ever happened to Grace. At least now she has to figure things out on her own without Linda breathing down her neck. I wanted to agree, but a part of me felt sorry for Grace. She'd spent her entire life trying to please her mom, only to get tossed aside when she didn't fit into Linda's plans anymore. Over the next few weeks, bits and pieces of Grace's new life started trickling back to me through mutual friends. She'd moved into a small apartment downtown and was looking for a new job. Something in the art world, finally, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. Apparently, Linda wasn't done making things difficult for Grace. She'd been bad-mouthing her to family and friends, saying things like, "I did everything for her, and this is how she repays me." One of Grace's cousins even told me that Linda had tried to cut Grace off financially. "She thinks if Grace struggles enough, she'll come crawling back," the cousin said. That sounded exactly like something Linda would do, use money as a leash to try to drag Grace back into line. But from what I heard, Grace wasn't biting. She was working odd jobs, selling some of her art online and doing whatever she could to make ends meet. One day, I got a text from Grace. My heart skipped for a moment seeing her name pop up after weeks of silence. The message read, "Hey, can we talk? I really need text from Grace." My heart skipped for a moment seeing her name pop up after weeks of silence. The message read, "Hey, can we talk? I really need someone right now." I stared at my phone, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I replied, "What's going on?" She called almost immediately, her voice trembling. "Adam, I'm so sorry for everything. You were right about my mom. She's been impossible. She kicked me out because I wouldn't meet this guy she's trying to set me up with." I sighed, the familiar mix of frustration and pity bubbling up. "Grace, I'm sorry you're going through that, but I don't know what you want from me. I told you this would happen if you didn't stand up to her." "I know," she said quickly, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up, and I should have defended you, but I'm trying to fix things now. I'm trying to figure out my life, and I just need someone to talk to." "Grace," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "I'm glad you're starting to see the problem, but you didn't choose me when it mattered. You let your mom push me away. I can't be the person who picks up the pieces now." She went quiet for a moment, then said, "I understand. I don't know who else to turn to." It hurt to hear her say that. I'd wanted to be her person for so long, but now it felt like too little, too late. "You'll figure it out," I said softly. "You're stronger than you think, but you need to do this on your own." A few months later, I heard through the grapevine that Linda had finally stopped trying to control Grace's life, or at least scaled back. Grace had gone no contact with her mom for a while, which I imagine was the wake-up call Linda needed. But even if Linda did try to patch things up, I doubted their relationship would ever be the same. As for me, I'd moved on. I wasn't dating anyone seriously yet, but I was taking my time, figuring out what I wanted in a partner. One thing was for sure, I wasn't going to settle for someone who let other people dictate their life. Looking back, I don't regret calling off the engagement. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. Grace needed to break free from her mom's control, and I couldn't do that for her. She had to do it on her own, in her own time,